This is another checkpoint video for development version 1.09 of Android space game synSpace Drone Runners, available for the Amazon Fire HD and in the Google Play Store. It's a space game. You fly around, you shoot weapons, you pick up power-ups, you get weapon upgrades, you get ship upgrades, you melee, dogfight other players. Oh, those are nice. So that's the game, but every once in a while you run into gravitational objects like planets and stars. And soon, I think, the Super Fun Time Power Show is a development panel that lets me get into some code that otherwise would be inaccessible. And if I go to the Critters panel, then what it's showing me is one of those synSpace planets that you could have come up to. But that same picture, this is 128 by 128 pixels, it's mapped onto a mesh, which is a fractal surface, so you can see some sort of hills, and that's just random. But walking along the surface are a bunch of critters. These are not finished, and I'm just giving them random colors because it was boring having them all white. And they're autonomous at the moment. So they don't have a lot of different mechanics. They can walk, they can stop, they can turn to a different heading. That's about it. They try not to walk off the disk, or at least I'm trying to teach them to avoid walking off the disk. If they do walk off, you fall about 100 meters and then you're walking on the floor of space. There's nothing. This is the camera looking from below the terrain up through it, so there's no limits on anything like that. Although I'm using this terrain basically just as test data, so that I'd have elevation data, because I can't do the inverse kinematic animation of the feet without knowing for sure what the height of the ground is at the point of contact. And these are just all critters. I have about 40 in here right now, I guess. Close up. And this technology, which is amazing, that it lets me, using an Android canvas, to it's just in the Android canvas there's a function called drawVertices, and you give it from what its perspective is a 2D mesh of points and a photograph, and it will map that photograph onto that 2D mesh. So you do all the 3D stuff. You have a camera and you map your 3D onto 2D, but then you provide that 2D as a mesh. I have it all set up right now that my 128 by 128 pixel picture is mapped onto a 128 by 128 meter environment. So each of these squares ends up being 1 meter square. The next stage in the animation stuff is to use their actual velocity across the surface to modulate the speed of the animation, because the animation is designed, let's say, for 1 meter per second, and then if I'm walking at 5 meters per second, I have to play it faster. And then after I've got that working so that the basic pace is right, then I add the IK, where when the animation says a foot is on the ground, then I say, okay, you said the foot is on the ground, I'll hold you to it. I will glue that foot to the ground, and if you're moving in a line like this, the effective part that is glued to the ground will be moving away from you. Your foot's going to be pulled out from under you, and it's your job, Mr. Animation, to lift that foot and move it forward in time. And if you don't, I'm going to try and punish you with my physics system so that you look like you're stumbling, and then I'm going to try and correct it on my own. I'm going to try not to fall down. And the secret is I can't really fall down. I can kind of animate that I've pretended to fall down, but as far as the host game environment is concerned, I'm always, you know, a half meter above the surface or whatever it is. I really like these dark skies, and as I point out every time, that is the game. That is synSpace. The game has been dimmed a little bit, but it's the night sky for this terrain, and I just think that's awesome. That is truly awesome. Let's add some centaurs. First of all, do they have an animation? They think they do. Let's see if the poses look good. Pose 0, 1, 2, 3. Oh no, that looks horrible. That's not a walk. We'll do the future a favor. Pose 0 might be the not the T pose of the skeleton, but the rest pose of the character. You know, it's like most comfortable standing around pose. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, the hyper simplified walk animation. Well, first of all, let's go to the bones panel, and this is what the T pose looks like. And we say pose 0 is us standing around. There we are. We're standing around. We're going to leave the top of the body alone for now and just try and have just the legs walk. And we'll say in pose 1, it'll be right leg all the way forward with the heel just making contact, first contact with the ground. You can see the purple extended when it came into contact with the ground. And it's important that I actually make, quote, ground contact, because even though the real ground won't necessarily be in these spots, it's the way that the animation has to tell me at runtime that as far as the animator was concerned, the foot was supposed to be in ground contact at the moment this keyframe took effect. So 1, 2, 3, so frame 3 should be the opposite of that. So it should be the left foot far forward. The problem is when the foot that's been falling behind needs to be brought back to the front, it actually needs to lift up, like your mom told you, don't drag your feet. It has to actually lift up really quickly or it will drag. Because if it just kind of arcs back like a pendulum, it will scuff the ground. And if you do that, I want that to make you stumble because of the physics, or actually force you to commit to the fact that you're injecting some energy and thus trying to hop, trying to jump, whether you're successful or not. And we select pose 1, and then we make it a keyframe. Pose 2, keyframe. Pose 3, keyframe. Pose 4, keyframe. Now I go to animate, and I tap in the magic spot, and it should say 1, 2, 3, 4, and it should look roughly like a walk cycle. Okay, but you can see that the feet are not right because they go back. Oh yeah, they're never going up on their tiptoes. There's no tiptoe frame. Okay, so we go back to pose. That means my left foot should be tiptoe. Go back to the critters screen. If I hold down the demo button, I can drop a few Deirdres in the world. It's not going to necessarily be easy to find them. I'll just drop a whole bunch. Okay. Can you see? Those are just my horses. Well, here, let's see if we can drive one. I'm stepping between all of the critters I've dropped. Okay, apparently I've dropped 41 critters. Hey, look, there I am. Oh, I didn't do anything with the arms. So in theory, I can command him. Yeah. Walk faster. And see, his feet do not go faster when he was walking faster. So that's a bug. And also, oh no, I can back up again. I broke that for a while too. And the camera's supposed to follow him, but I sort of had to turn that off because it was making me seasick. This is not actually... it has its place. Anyway, so we added an animation, a new animated walk for a stock centaur critter. You can't help but see more than is really there. Like the circles sometimes. Oh yeah, those are muscle bumps or they're hair bumps, or they make sense. They're not just circles. Oh look, it's almost like he's striped. Actually, you know, I gotta make some spiders because this display technology probably would work really well for that. Now I can sort the critters, which I'm not doing, and render them so that the closer ones are on top of the more distant ones. That's just me being lazy at this point. But all of these guys that just went behind the hill, I just don't have a way of dealing with that. Other than, you know, well, doing it myself, as it were. Anyway, so that was the update. But this is the first time I've boosted the number of critters allowed in the arena to above 8. I was a little worried, but it looks like the skeleton stuff is not expensive at all. So that's good to hear. And that's that. Thank you very much. Okay, this is back to a factor of 100. And so this is what it was doing before. And if I make an animation from this, so when you're not actually jumping directly from one pose to another, that super jumpiness is not quite so bad. I'm going to have to make a real walk cycle and see what it actually looks like. But definitely adding character. Maybe not good character. Go back to pose. So if I just adjust him, he's wobbly all the time. Woo! And so I have to kind of bring it back to a legal hip thing. But you could, you know, if you twist, that's okay, so long as the opposing hip goes back the same amount. So that these guys stay collinear, I guess. Something like that. And then, let's... I crush you. You are tiny and I'm going to crush you. Oh, actually, that's part of my animation, isn't it? Ah, crushing you. Ah, I crush you, but I'm drunk. I cannot kill. Oh, what is happening? Oh, I'm sliding sideways. Ah, what a terrible animation. But my center of mass is very nice. No, what's going to happen? Okay, anyway, moving along. Okay, it's hula dance mode now. Modern art. Is it getting bigger? But so long as it's kind of a simulation of a liquid when they just have lateral velocities. But technically, each individual joint there is only motivated to get to its ideal pose position. It's just behaving like it's orbiting. You know, it's like it's got a force connecting it just that one spot. So if you look at each individual's thing, it should be orbiting. It should be doing an oval of some sort, and that the actual joint is at one of the foci of that oval. And all the light masses are kind of holding still. Well, it's more alive than just a static pose. Ah! I've just added a little bit of physics to the pose system. So I'm on the pose page, and I'm currently looking at pose number 1. And this is just random. And you've seen it pose before, but now when you drag it, it also has a little bit of ripple. Boing, 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 boing. And the idea is that when you're animating something, without the physics, looks like this. This is just going back and forth between two images, two poses. It's very repetitive. But now you turn this on. Turn it off. Turn it on. Just a little bit of wobble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a walk animation. His first job is to get his right foot. Yeah, and the same time that his right foot was going forward, his left foot was going backwards. So this really is the frame where the left foot is as far back as it's going to be while still in contact with the ground. And the right foot is as far forward as it's going to be while still in contact with the ground. And we have to adjust the height to make it possible. And the right leg is forward, and the hip is twisted symmetrically. Okay, so now in pose 3, I should need to do the same thing, but now with the left foot forward. And the right foot back. Okay, so I need to lower my root. I should have lowered the root on the skeleton. Okay. Okay. So somehow I did that in pose 4 instead of pose 3, so that's irritating. Okay, so pose 1 is like that. Okay, so, well, let's see if I can do this. I copy it, and then I go here and I paste it. Why, that looks like it worked. That's nice. So in pose 2, the right foot is halfway along its path, and the left foot is racing forward. So the left foot is racing forward. I like the heel way back. Sort of a flamenco thing. But like in my mind, in my simpleton mind, this is the character. This is the pizzazz. This is what makes this critter different. This is why this critter exists. This is part of the walk cycle where the actual root is going to be as high up in the air as possible, and then in other places where the knee is bent more, it's going to be lower. So that means this one is right foot forward. Right foot forward, right foot forward, right foot forward. And then left foot should be so let's just check the feet. So that's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. The ground contacts look good. So let's go ahead now and make an animation. So we don't select pose 0, but we do select pose 1, then pose 2, then pose 3, then pose 4. Yeah, foot up, foot down, foot up, foot down. And once the foot's in contact, it stays in contact. Okay, the center of mass. Staying really nice and centered. Okay, so that's our basic walk animation. Knee up, do the IK. I think the foot's actually changing. Okay, randomly swaying arm. So that should be some real whip snapping there from those arms. Right, so this was with 0.9 friction, whereas before I had 0 friction. So this is already a lot more what I'm looking for. But I wanted a walk animation to compare it to. Okay, so now I have that, and we're going to experiment with friction. And friction 0.8 was still pretty loosey-goosey. So we'll try friction, I'm sorry, 0.9. So now we'll try friction 0.8. Whoa! Did I do something wrong here? 1, 2, 3, 4. What's happening? It's taking the long way around. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that really because of the friction? I don't think so. Well, let's make those knee lifts a little less dramatic. Okay, yeah, I guess that's just something that happens when you're sufficiently extreme. So now with the IK, but this was 0.8 friction. Yeah, that's actually... I mean, the Adam's apple here is still way too wobbly. Oh, you know, tails should actually behave pretty well. How's that look? Let's keep the foot like that. Yeah. Okay. Turn on the IK. We go over to bones. We grab this leg and we clip it. The one we just clipped, we sort of move it off to the side for a second. You'll see why. Now we click on that guy and we paste. Okay? So we just pasted an identical copy of the leg. So we're going to now drag this out the back here. Animation. Well, okay. Now you can turn the IK on and off. If you turn the IK off and you just tap on a pose, it just instantly snaps to that new pose. These are not, these poses pretty much made themselves through various bugs over time. Kind of cool. But anyway, if you come over to animate and then turn on the IK stuff and go back to pose, now when you tap on a pose, you're requesting that he switch to the new pose, and his error from the new pose, and his difference, his delta from the new pose is an error which he corrects with physics, i.e. velocities. And so it takes him a little while to do it. I got rid of my maximum, oh no I didn't, I kept the maximum velocity. I sort of evened out the joint masses though. I had a really wide variation. Right now the biggest variation is that the hips are still really heavy and the head is super heavy. So most poses the head lags everybody else. I just like that it actually, the physics kind of leads to something sort of natural looking of a person trying to follow your orders. Now it does ring, which most people wouldn't do. Woo, 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 woo. But that's what I'm counting on to get an oscillation going during a walk cycle. So it becomes a walk oscillation more so than just a canned walk cycle. Was there anything else to show? No. It's just like these are, the poses are examples of comfortable postures for this skeleton. And they can be picked for, you know, dramatic purposes as well. But the idea that the skeleton lives most of its time in a blended, a lerped state between these extremes. If the skeleton needs to deliver its head to a particular location when its feet are in a particular spot, if nothing else, it could look through the poses and say, well, here's a pose that achieves that goal of the feet being here and the head being over there. So I like these parts of that pose. So what I'll do is I'll lerp myself towards those parts of the pose, while these other parts of the pose I'll drive from a different source. I'll optimize for a different goal. So that your walking is one thing, but your hands might be, well, they might be just counterweighting your walking. But you may be carrying a heavy object, and they may be adjusting that heavy object to have the best center of mass. And I talked about it before. Center mass here, it's blinking red-green. Basically, every time both feet are on the ground, then it's happy. Okay, and now let's start bringing them forward and back. That's enough. Okay, so they're going to be sort of swinging around pretty wildly, I think. Okay, now maybe I'm trying to imply that he's running and actually getting airborne a little bit. Anyway, that's that. Oh, I gave the workspaces no names. So 0 through 7 workspaces, the 8 workspaces are now also A through G in there. The first one's called Alvin, and then Betty, and then Carl. That's the idea. And right now that's the only storage. There's just 8 critters that you're developing, that you have 8 workspaces. And then eventually there'll be a clone button somewhere. Okay, synSpace drone runners, version 1.09 development snapshot. The critter asset subsystem. You have 8 workspaces. Each workspace has a skeleton, one skeleton. You can do anything you want with the skeleton, but you should form a T-pose. You can do fun things like I can clip this leg, and then I can pin it to this tail. And now his leg is back there. When it has detected that a foot has come into contact with the ground when it wasn't in contact before, it enters a state for that joint, and this is for any joint, but predominantly for feet. It says, okay, I made contact with the ground at position XYZ at time t. And then the next time it's asked to pose the skeleton for the new phase of the animation, sometime t later, delta t later, it first has figured out where the system as it is wants the joint to go, but it also knows the relative ground velocity, which it can then just add to the previous point. So it knows the exact location the foot should be in if it has retained perfect contact with the ground. And then it can compare those two, and the difference is an error. And on the one hand, I can use that as an IK signal to just correct the error by moving the foot. I can use large enough errors as an excuse to kick up dirt or dust or sparks or some other particles because your foot is you know, skidding with the ground. And I can long hold the demo button, and that will it'll make a new copy, an instance of this critter that you're working on, and put it in the arena. Anyway, thank you. I've got workspace 1 selected, workspace Betty, which is my little horse. We've got Betty's bones, which is the skeleton itself, which we can hopefully still edit if we really want to. Pose. Betty comes with some number of poses. Let's go ahead and add these as keyframes. And let's just hope that it's poses 1 through 4. 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, it looks a little like she's walking backwards, but in general, a little animation. Anyway, so that's recap of what we've had before. But what we finally have is the arena, where each of these now is a separate instance of the critter class, so they are critter objects. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in here right now. So as I recall, I can have 8. So let's go ahead and add a horse. Doink. And now there should be a horse to the right of that guy. Okay, I fixed another little camera issue. So now I can pretty much look at my little row of critters. All okay. I'm in VR mode, the red-blue stereo glasses. And I can zoom back. But the zoom is just a camera zoom. I mean, I'm literally just zooming the lens and I'm not moving the camera. So the camera is standing about right here. So like when I come like this, the camera's between these two guys. So the camera's between here and here. No matter what my zoom level is. I can zoom out to here, the camera is still between there, so it gives you this pretty distorted fisheye thing. If I try and look at them from above, you know, these guys, they look right, but as you come back out, by the time you get to the ends, they almost look like they're lying on their sides. And yet, if you look at them, quote, correctly, they're not weirdly rotated at all. It's just, it's just super wide angle. Here's my primate with long tail. So this is sort of a heavyset ape-like creature, maybe. A gorilla. Anyway, so I'm going with a 16:9 screen. You got the menu bar along the top, and basically I'm talking about wall-to-wall 3D screen with some sort of terrain, let's call it fractal terrain, and using the canvas called drawVertices, which I didn't even know existed, which allows you to provide an array of vertices, two-dimensional vertices. These are not the 3D data, this is the mapped to the screen 2D data. And you also provide an array of indices and a mode of operation like a triangle strip that allows you to provide the vertices in a particular order such that they can be interpreted and emit a bunch of triangles. And because it's a canvas call, drawVertices, it's going to draw those triangles using the current pen, the current brush, which is the thing you're used to, that has a stroke and a stroke width and has a fill. And if you selected stroked and filled and you set the color to green, then I think you'd get just a green rectangle with a possibly goofy edge. But you can also provide a set of UV coordinates, and you can make a so-called bitmap shader that overrides inside of Paint what it does when it's drawing something. So to get the color information, instead of just saying set color to green and then everything is green, it says get the color information from this bitmap. Bottom line, it will draw your bitmap on this warped sheet you've made. And if this warped sheet is a fractal terrain elevation map kind of thing, you've stretched your bitmap on top of it. And maybe your bitmap has some snowy peaks and some green valleys. But drawVertices takes the vertices, it takes the indices so that it knows the order in which to make the triangles, and it takes the text array, the UV array, so that it knows how to map onto the bitmap shader's bitmap to get color information. And then it takes also, if you like, optionally, an array of colors, just regular RGB colors that basically are vertex colors. So each vertex gets a unique, well, whatever color it wants, 24-bit color. I'm not sure if alpha is obeyed there. What I would love to hear is that controls the alpha even when you're using a texture. I'm hoping that that'll be where I can sort of simulate lighting, where when I load the map, I can do my own fancy math to figure out which triangles should be brightly lit and which triangles should be in darkness. And then boil that down to a simple vertex color, possibly just a grayscale vertex color, which is then blended by the color map image, and hopefully then looks like a lit or unlit copy of that thing. It's still going to be a sunny day, I think. I mean, I could recompute it, maybe with 128 by 128, given that I don't even have to compute them all at once. I mean, that could even be kind of the fun of the transition from day to night. I could just randomly, like every frame, I could update 5 of 1,000 points, and then they would take effect on the next render, so that particular hillside would just get a little darker, and you just see this general darkening. That would be really neat. I hope that works out. I would love to see what that looks like. But drawVertices, if you do give the vertex colors, it blends between them on a per pixel basis, it looks like. Might be real expensive, I don't know. But what I want to do, quote, next is get to the point where I have the right camera. Actually I need to do the terrain pretty soon, because the ground contact stuff is unsatisfying without a terrain to walk on. Okay, so this is some more arena stuff. Critter Arena is part of synSpace Drone Runners. And the idea here is that one of my workspaces is this horse prototype, and it has some poses. And let's see, in this case the poses are, so 0 is just standing, I kind of like that, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 are the walk animation. So now I go to animate, and oh, it looks like it's backwards. Okay, so say I didn't like that keyframe, I would select it and delete it, and now I'm back to just the walk animation. I still got a lot of work to do on this guy, but the point is that he's in my workspace. I can push the demo button, and a copy of him is then moved into my arena. And I'm currently looking at Critter 0. He's red. If I tap this, I can step through. Anyway, when I select a critter, I can cause it to play one of its animations by tapping, in this case, F0, and that starts its walk animation loop. And then if I switch to the other critter and press F0, I start his walk animation. And now I've got two critters in the arena at the same time, both running their walk animations. Now, can I tell if IK is turned on? Okay, turned IK on. First of all, if IK is truly on, then we'll tell it here. Oh yeah, it's on. So if we go back to the arena, can we see any IK happening? Not really. So if I just keep adding horses, I'll add another horse, and 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 another horse. Okay, and now I'll start each of them walking. They're not moving yet, they're just playing their walk animation, but eventually those will happen at the same time. So I've got them starting out in sort of a spiral pattern, a little more interesting than all in a line. And then I think I'll give them a guard, a patrol edict. So they'll do sort of a drunkard's walk, but if they get too far from their center location, they'll turn around and head back towards it. Oh yeah, here's my drawVertices experiment. This is just a single triangle that's right where I told it to be. And now I just need to make a little sheet. And I'll make a little flat sheet first, and then I'll make a fractal sheet. And then I'll see how far I can get in texturing it. See if I can make it look like a little mountain. And I can let the space game bleed through as like a nighttime sky or something. So can I give the illusion of them walking by rotating this slowly? Well, look at us horses. We're walking along. We're walking along. Look at us walking. We're just walking to get our oats. The oats that we know are waiting for us. Oats. Okay, here's a first attempt at drawVertices. Just a flat sheet. This is with 128 by 128, so 14,000 cells in the grid. Get down to 10 frames a second or so. And this is without texturing, this is just lines. And I'll do a little fractalizing on that, although I can't really move yet, so I'm stuck right here. Well, I guess the camera's not. Just the little man. Not sure if the camera is right or not. But anyway, too laggy at 128 by 128. So we'll make it 32 by 32 and see what that's like. Okay, so let's bring in a horse. And start it playing. And check out the map. So this is only a quarter of a kilometer to the horizon. Oh, I see. It's a line from all the way there to the other side. Any triangles I expected that are missing? No, it's just these top to bottom lines. Okay, this is using the drawVertices call to do a simple fractal surface. It's not very fractal yet. I can work out if they're back facing or not and remove them from the group. So I didn't use a triangle list. This is just, I'm sorry, I didn't use a triangle strip. This is a triangle list, which is not the most efficient use of indices, but it's very convenient. The problem is like this little sort of pyramid here. Once these are solid, I'll probably be able to see the invisible backside. But this is just a 16 by 16 grid, so frame rate does take a hit. So it drops from like 30 frames a second to 24 frames a second just by turning this grid on. Anyway, this is an experiment. This is an experiment using drawVertices to do a little fractal terrain. They're not really standing on the terrain. They're all in the same scene, but these guys are standing at altitude 0, and the terrain sheet now is warping a little bit above and below that. The vertex colors. So for each vertex, and the vertexes are about this far apart, I can provide a color. It automatically blends between the colors. These particular colors being kind of dark, it makes it look more like it's nighttime, which goes along really well with the synSpace game, which is still running in the background. I could fly by here and shoot stuff in the sky, and we would just see it as being our night sky. Unfortunately, I'm under the terrain right now. You can see I'm kind of under that little thing, and it's transparent, so you see both the top and the bottom triangles at the same time. So if I let's see, if I take the camera straight up, I'm looking straight down, kind of get X on the right. Now if I zoom out, you'll see the entire terrain sheet, and the frame rate actually gets a little better. In synSpace you can have planets, right? And they're just two-dimensional pictures, and I include a handful of planet pictures, and this is actually Earth. I don't know if you can tell, but there's Africa, Saudi Arabia, Europe. We go into the fun show, we go to the critters panel, we drop a critter onto the arena, we go to the arena. Ooh! Okay, so this is without the vertex colors, but yes, the frame rate's much better. Okay, so this is just with the bitmap, so that's more what the picture looks like. So that's good. So that does mean that I can use the vertex colors to create the illusion of darkness. So if the vertex colors I was using made this same picture look darker, more night sky. So now we zoom in, and we're now on a daytime planet, and the frame rate, instead of being 6.9, is now 18. The arena has a terrain because I need a three-dimensional surface to develop and test my auto walk behavior, and I need a world space 3D volume inside of Critter to test the I want critters to be able to self-navigate. I want them to be able to see an enemy on the distance and walk towards it pretty much automatically. I wouldn't mind if they could do a little bit of terrain following, and I'd certainly like them to obey impassable barriers. Okay, well, let's do a little anti-aliasing research. Set filter bitmap. Ooh. Critters. Let's pick a different critter. I like this horse. I'll bring the horse into the world. And I turned on smoothing. Okay, well, I do not see those little pixels anymore, so yes, it worked. That's actually probably pretty promising. Drop a guy in scene. Arena. So first of all, the frame rate's good again. So I'm looking in a bad direction, right? Yeah. So the painter's algorithm is very flawed, or very necessary here. And if I had backface culling these guys here would not be rendered. And if I had the painter's algorithm, these guys back here would have been rendered, but then the closer mount would have been rendered on top of them. Okay, I just put in some simple motion controls, and I've walked off the edge of the world here. So here I am standing. This background image is still the planet Earth, but now that I have motion, I'm no longer stuck to the center of that image. I've now walked to the edge, which isn't very far. You can see me there, but it's actually, I mean, when you're up close, it could be a useful illusion for like being in orbit, or even just like Discworld or something. It doesn't matter where you are when you first start in the proxy button, but if you go to the left, you rotate to the left, and if you go to the right, you rotate to the right. And you can see the camera is being dragged behind the character, but very slowly, so the character can get way far ahead. Woo! And then the camera will eventually catch up. I'm turning around and I'm going back the other way. What's the camera going to do? Well, of course, it's going to slowly go there, but it's not changing its heading. It's letting me have control of the heading at the moment, and that I could like drag the map off to the side, but it's gonna slowly drag me back. If I just wanted to zoom out and look at a different part of the map, I'd like to be able to just drag like this and move the whole map, you know, easily, and zoom in on that other spot and not have it snap back. So this is not my final game mechanic for the camera. Sorry. This guy doesn't even have an animation. That's how non-animation-y I am at the moment. Yeah, just speeding that up is actually going to be pretty cool, but oh, you know, maybe that's another thing. I should let you walk quite a ways to the side before I start to correct the heading. Also, is my pitch upside down now from this perspective? What do I expect to have happen? Well, anyway, I now have an actual animatable skeleton on an actual terrain with actual motion across that terrain, which has been sort of a gumption trap for me on completing my animation stuff, my inverse kinematic stuff. And it's not adjusting its pitch. So, whoa! So, let's see if we can get, oh my goodness. Okay, so clearly I think I'm upside down. So, I'm below the planet. Okay, I am going to do a little two-player experiment. We are on a server. We're the green player. So we're going to have a little two-player space game here in a minute. I can pick up things. So this guy is now joining on the same server. We'll let him be the red player. I'm going to be the blue player. Let's see, pick a different ship. Ooh, I like this one. Okay, we're going to launch. I guess I'm zoomed in too far. Okay, so I, the blue ship, am now flying around. The red ship is around somewhere. I have a radar here that's got a little red line on it that's pointing that direction. So we'll head over there, see if we can find him. Oh, there he is. Do you see me? Okay, he's going to come over now and say hello. Hi. How you doing? And if we zoom back, we can see that the arena is on planet Earth. Da-da-da! It was Earth all along! So we can zoom in, and notice you still can't really see me. I'm really tiny. That's appealing to me. Let's add a horse, and a horse. It just looks better when the ground is darker. Kind of eerier. Here, I'll fire my engines a little. take a shot. Okay. But in this Canvas app, where I can do some 3D stuff, but it really only has good performance if it's fairly small, I'm thinking, well, what if your skeleton was just a skeleton, but had a nice head, a nice 3D modeled head with animatable, posable teeth and eyes and ears and tongue and fun stuff like that, and you could make little animations of you sticking your tongue out or whatever. Then at render time, that head would be clipped onto your skeleton body. So everybody would be, in the synSpace arena dance party, each player would appear as just a bony old skeleton, but there'd be this nice mesh head on top. Okay, here's another little walk animation candidate here. It's in VR mode. So there's basically only two poses in this. There's the first pose, which is the right foot, whoops, the right foot all the way forward as it's just starting its contact with the ground. The heel has just hit the ground. The left foot is at the extreme end of its exposure, where its toe is just saying goodbye to the ground. It's going to have to lift up in a minute. After this frame, the right foot is going to just stay in contact with the ground, is going to move at a fixed velocity back until it becomes the left foot. The left foot, meanwhile, has to get back up to the front in time to be in this position. And what I think I want is I want it to move most of that time really fast and then just slow down a little bit at the very end here, so that when it hits the ground it's not going super fast. But to lift it up really fast, we needed a second frame. The right foot is just moving slightly back, and since this is the halfway point, it's in the halfway position. And the left knee has swung all the way from back here to up there. And again, it's just two poses. Now I cheated and I duplicated them for the left leg. But in theory, if I wanted to, I could take just the leg animation from these first two frames, and then I could flip it for the for the other side of the animal, as it were. And then the upper body could be dedicated entirely to something else. Flying a kite, holding a hang glider, firing a weapon. But it affects the center of mass, and as you can see down here, I've kept the center of mass pretty much right in line with the center of motion. And the way I'm doing that is, you can see I'm sort of bringing the feet up in front, so we're sort of model walking, and that allows us to stay in balance technically. Now front and back, I'm not sure that's completely legitimate. But we're also in forward motion, so we'd expect to see a little bit of that. And of course, who knows what it would look like in a mesh. But that could look a lot worse. And if we do our standard little trick here, we go over to the bones and we make the skeleton itself bow-legged and go back to the animate, and now the animate is bow-legged. Okay, this is just another version of the two-pose walk cycle. Here I've turned off all upper body components, so that's just the feet. You notice it has an unrealistically high kick, and of course it looks really unnatural without the upper body doing what it would be doing. And really, I know to do it right, I have to be able to propagate deviations to the root itself. So the feet have to stay in contact with the ground. Everything else is allowed to wiggle. And they only have to stay in contact with the ground during half the animation, during the time that they are the load-bearing foot. But now here you can see So I wasn't normalizing the quaternion, and it turned out that the effect of that was it didn't preserve the bone length. So that during one of these 180-degree rotations, in the center of the rotation, the bone would actually be noticeably smaller, which did not actually look bad. It actually added quite a bit of interest to the motion. So, yeah, there is that. So now this, for example, as it interpolates the motion, the foot also goes more underground than it would have when it wasn't preserving the bone lengths. I can either just say, oh, well, foot can't go underground. If you tell me to put it underground, I will just make the bone a little shorter right now, as much as needed to keep it on the ground. And the only thing I change is the foot position. And the only change I make is to make it on the ground. But if your error is big, then your leg might get, arbitrarily shortened. So what I would rather do is say, yes, it is wrong for my foot to go under the ground, but the proper response is not to chop my foot off. It's to push back either in the angle or in the elevation, so that what this going under the ground actually represents is a point in time when the skeleton is lifting itself up in the air a little bit. So my response, I think, should be to first consider adjusting angles as a result, but if you like your angles, just apply that vertical push all the way up to the root, so that when we get to this part of the cycle, the whole body goes up, such that the foot now stays exactly at ground level, and that's good. And then again, I'm watching the center of mass, and you can see it's got a little bias to the side there, to his left. And that's something I want the physics system to be dynamically balancing in the middle of the animation. So again, the animation represents a desired position for a joint to get to, but it's the physics system that gets the joint to that point. And the physics system gets to include both a force that comes from the attractiveness of the pose, from the attraction of the pose position, another force that's just gravity pulling down, and then those forces turn into accelerations, which turn into velocities, which are remembered from one frame to the next, and which create momentum because each joint has a certain amount of mass. The end. Thank you very much. I made a few more demo skeletons just to have some different combinations to work with. So this is my so-called centaur. And this guy has 4 legs, front legs and back legs, and 2 arms. And he's pretty much just a biped in the front and a quadruped in the back. And he's got a 4-segment tail, which is maybe more than a centaur needs. He's doing my 2-pose walk animation with the extreme knee-up pose and the extreme toe distance pose. And then I'm going to do specifically a cat and a dog, because those will be good starting characters for lots of monsters in world. And also, I have vested reasons for wanting to pose little kittens now. Did I show you my scar today? It's healed a little bit. But you can still see her little bite, her complete little mouth shape. It's right here. Little vampire kitten. So again, I'm thinking, cats and dogs and bears and wolves and things like that. Just your basic 4-legged animal. If you think of it as being a dinosaur, maybe, this is my stride, basically. Just watch the ground contact. So each foot makes contact, then slides, and then comes forward, makes contact, then slides. To that up, to that down. Okay, well anyway, so there is, that's probably closer to what the avian, anyway. Okay, little progress report, synSpace drone runners. This is development snapshot of version 1.09. You have 8 work slots. If you can't tell, this is modeled after a horse. I would like to have some joints could optionally be sensitive to wind, for example a tree. Some joints should be able to grow over the life of the critter, so like a tree might start with a complete skeleton of all of its ultimate branches with their full lengths, but then when it's first born I only render the root, the trunk, and maybe buds where the next limbs are going to be, and then over time those lengthen out, and at some point their children start to manifest, and then they start to lengthen out while everybody's lengthening over time and thickening over time, until finally you've expressed the full tree as it originally was designed. Development snapshot version 1.09 Android game synSpace drone runners. Okay, so this is a fresh skeleton made from my avian template, and I'm now actually looking at an avian skeleton on Google here, and I'm going to turn this into something more like that. I need to have that going back using some funky attack. Kitty scar update. This one over here, it's almost all gone. You can't really see it. It's like from there to there. And then I had one right here. It's all healed. And then her tiny little V-shaped dentition, almost all gone. And I don't know what she did to me here. It just looks different than it used to. It's supposed to look like this. This is the other one we did. And I think that's pretty much how we left it. And we just check these other poses, which are apparently left over from the previous time I used this slot for a different skeleton. Now, this is not me making an animation, this is me inheriting an animation from a different critter. Well, surprisingly animated.
Okay, cat's out.
Oops, cat just escaped. And here we have a brand new biped, and this is a skeleton again. So, but we have a new feature. Can you read these buttons? Looks like you might be able to read these buttons. So the important buttons is clip and pin 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick this joint here, which is the waist joint, and then we're going to tap the clip button. Clip joint 1 and children, long press to delete. So it clipped it, it's on the clipboard, and now I pick a destination joint, the head, and I do a long press on this pin 11, and what the 11 means is there's 11 bones on the clipboard. So if I long press here, we'll pin them to that guy. So now you see that's everything I cut off of, everything I clipped, and now I put it on his head. Now, just to be perverse, we'll put another copy here, long press pin 11, another copy here, long press pin 11. So here we have our antler man doing his little antler man dance. I'm the antler man, see me dance. And if we want to change his little dance, we come over here and we pick some pose in the middle, like this one, say. I mean, I'll say, well, let's make some big change here. Let's have him bend over. He'll do a meta bow, a multi bow. Okay. Let's see, in this pose here, let's bring his arms in like he's going to reach forward. All arms reaching forward. Make them reach individually. Okay, so what's that going to look like? This is probably not the way you would design animation. Oh, I see they're like wings. Woo! Twing. Anyway, so you can now cut and paste bones on the skeleton. So I think you'll be able to do trees pretty well. How's that animation? Whoa! Oh. Are you seeing that? Yeah, okay. And now we'll give it in VR mode for those of us with glasses. Let's get out our glasses. Okay, this is a quick demo of simple animation. This is just based on two poses, that pose and that pose. So it's just going back and forth between these two poses, and it's just doing what the pose tells it to do. But when I turn on IK, it enables the physics system. And now what happens is, as the pose says, I would like you to look like this. And yet he still looks like he looked before the pose came along. And I compute the difference, and that becomes the error in the pose. And then I turn that into a force. And then that force becomes an acceleration based on the mass of the individual joints, and they all get velocities, and they all start to move. And the only thing that moves the joints towards their pose position is their physics velocity based upon the force of the pose error. As you can see, it's right now it makes it jumpy. It makes it lumpy, and I can't really explain the lumpiness. It's possible that I'm actually moving things the opposite direction, but it makes a difference. Turn it off, and it's boring smooth. Turn it on, and it's got character. If I go to animate mode and tap the IK button, there's some physics turned on internally now. That basically, it's trying to get into that pose where the arm was down. Over here you can see what it should look like. And what happens is it started off with the arm out straight in the T-pose, and it said, oh, well, there's an error here. This one needs to be that direction, this one and it came up with little vectors saying, I really ought to move them in these directions. And it turned those vectors into forces. And then it applied those forces to the masses at the joints, so F equals ma, so A equals F over m. So it took the individual forces, divided by the individual masses, to come up with an acceleration on a joint. And then it computed all the other things that could provide accelerations. But in this particular experiment right here, I've turned those off, and I'm just looking at the pose error force. So it's taken this long with a correlation, a coefficient, whatever it is, of 1.0. And I started off with 0.001, and I'm going up by factors of 10 to characterize it. And it's been making sense. It's taking less and less time to damp out the oscillation. And when the oscillation's done, it's pretty much what the artist asked for in the pose. If I actually were to make an animation right now, say from keyframe there to keyframe here, and now I turn that on, yeah, so there's more going on now than if I turn the IK off. You see what the animation looks like. So it's just sort of a arm level to arm down, arm level to arm down. But with this physics on, and of course this is too loosely coupled. It allows the bones to stretch, but this is where I'm headed.